Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is James Caton, and this is the Generate Now podcast, the Microsoft podcast, where you will hear from our partners and our customers on their Azure OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Copilot successes. Today, we have Anya FitzGibbon talking to us about her Azure OpenAI, ChatGPT deployment, and her persona-based approach for scaling it across the enterprise. To learn more about her project and who this customer is, please listen on. Anya, good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for joining us this evening on the Generate Now podcast. We have a really interesting story today, a project that you've done with TCS on generative AI. Thank you for joining us and being here to tell us the story. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and Endeavour Energy, just to provide context to our audience?
My name's Anya FitzGibbon. I am the head of data governance and delivery at Endeavour Energy. Endeavour Energy is a company that's been providing safe and reliable and affordable energy to customers for over 130 years now. We've got a vision for smarter solutions, and their purpose is about giving communities a brighter future with power. So we're working towards smarter, cleaner, and more flexible power. So our strategy at the moment is about decarbonising the grid for 2035. We supply, I think it's almost 3 million people with energy in the greater western region of Sydney, circling around the CBD of Sydney in Australia and New South Wales, from the north down to the south and out to the west. Really fun company. I've been here for just over a year now, and the data analytics and insights team has been around in Endeavour Energy for about 2 years now, and they've had the vision of making sure that data is the forefront of what we're doing here, but also now AI is data has given us the opportunity to stand on the coattails of what's coming through with the AI world.
So 130 years, that means that Endeavour's gone through postal mail on horseback, telegrams, and now into the generative AI era.
Yes, it's certainly been an organisation that's been evolving. I've seen and I've heard anecdotes of where people were using paper and pen, pins on boards to identify networks and issues, down to digitization, and now we're taking that next leap ahead. So yes, always innovating and moving for the times. Yeah.
Outstanding. So Anya, so let's talk about the project that you executed with Tata Consultancy Services. What problem was it that Endeavour was trying to solve for?
AI and generative AI in particular has captured the imaginations of the whole world, including our board and our executives here at Endeavour Energy. So the challenge was set down to us is, what are we doing with generative AI or AI as a whole? What I'd say is that we have at Endeavour Energy been using AI for a lot of things over the past few years as point solutions, but with the emergence of generative AI, it really begins to democratize that use of AI capability. Previously, those point solutions have been very much led by very highly skilled technicians and developers. Generative AI is putting that in the hands of everyone. Now, the challenge was, how can we make the most of generative AI across the organization? In particular, where are the ideas going to come from in the organization, and understanding where those ideas are going to come from, and making sure that those ideas come to life. So putting some sort of tool in the hands of everyone, or making it accessible to everyone across the organization, whether they're in the field or they're in the back office or an executive, was really crucial to this, because we really don't know where the next idea will come from. We also wanted our workforce to understand the opportunities with generative AI and not be afraid to play with it. We really wanted to get people to feel comfortable using it, bearing in mind that they've probably used it in other tools without knowing it already, but being really comfortable that 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 they can use it, that it can actually help them, and start those conversations across the organization. So I guess that the real problem was, I guess the problem statement was, how can we enable Endeavour Energy to uplift its AI literacy, particularly in the generative AI space, safely, securely, and without any concerns for the organization. So really, how can we get that into the hands of everyone so they can start understanding, we can harness the power of that and understand what use cases there are out there.
So Anya, I love that description. One of the things that is very, very unique about generative AI is that it is so accessible to everyone. And it's accessible in a non-intimidating form, because for all of us, the natural way of communicating is through language. And now we have the ability to do that with our data, to do that with devices via these services like Azure OpenAI. So love the philosophy at Endeavour Energy. So let's talk a little bit about the use case and the technology that you deployed with Tata Consultancy Services. Walk us through the process of the specific use case and how you selected the technology to address the problem that you were trying to solve.
We all knew that people at Endeavour Energy were already beginning to use ChatGPT. It wasn't blocked, and we'd heard from case studies around the world that blocking it isn't really going to help remove the risk of people using that. So, and in fact, it will just drive it underground. So we knew people were using it. We knew people were reading about it and were getting excited about it. So we wanted to create something that was similar to that, but in a safe and secure environment, so that we weren't losing IP, that people felt safe to use it, that none of our confidential or information or prompts or responses were going outside our organization. Now, we've worked with TCS for many years, and they certainly came to the party when we were even just talking about ideas. Between TCS and Microsoft, it was a bit of a no-brainer that there was, working with the best of the best, and they had some ideas of how we can do this. I guess one of our biggest concerns was, what was this going to cost? Because there's this new ideas of tokenization. What was the process of implementing such a solution? What were the security controls that we needed to consider? What was the cost of total cost of ownership? And how are we going to roll this out and support it? So we worked really closely with Tata Consulting and Microsoft to really set out about setting up a proof of concept where we could answer these questions, so that when we do want to put something out that's fully productionized, we had all those answers. So it almost wasn't much of a decision to be made, because we had the best of the best already in-house working with us. It was really just to go, let's see what we can do and see what this could really look like.
So what did it look like? At the end of the day, right? Yep. You've developed this and you've got this wonderful solution internally. What are the personas? Who are the people using this? What are they able to do that they might have been doing on the side unofficially with, potentially non-secure, non-enterprise grade solutions? You've been able to put that wrapper around it, the Microsoft security framework, the responsible AI framework, but also the deployment discipline that TCS brings to these enterprise projects. So once this got deployed, what did it look like?
The solution looks very similar to what you'd see if you were using ChatGPT. But we certainly branded it Endeavour Energy, and we created a few different flavors. And this was all what TCS brought to the party together with Microsoft. So we had something called the global version, which is just like your normal ChatGPT, ask it anything about anything in the world from November 2021 onwards, prior. And then we also had our own internal one. And this is where it really started getting exciting. And this is where we really want to grow the platform going forward. This was being trained on our own content and our own data. So we put in, we started with some health and safety procedures So we, as you can imagine, in a energy industry, there are a lot of procedures to make sure that when you're working with high voltage networks and electricity, that you do things safely. So a lot of procedures. So we ingested those and put them into the learning model, as well as some other key critical documents. That's where we got a lot of uptake, because it made understanding those documents really simple, and you could personify them. So you could ask our internal health and safety documentation, or we called it, I think it was enterprise, something like, what's the difference between a danger tag and a warning tag? And it will give you the information with citations. Now, the citations were really important to us, because there's one thing that everyone hears about is hallucination. So having that citations to know where the information's derived from really helped us get the credibility of what the solution looked like. So we did that, but then you could also answer questions such as that danger and warning tag question, but you could ask it in different personas. So as if I was in the field, explain that what that means to me. As if I was a 5-year-old, as if I was an executive, as if I was a health and safety officer, as if I was the CFO. So really interesting ways to sort of circumvent and make that understanding what the information we have really is, instead of reading reams and reams of content, understanding very quickly what it is. We also had a playground area. So that was where we had some pre-configured prompts, really useful and exciting things, just to start igniting that different ways of thinking and understanding what prompting is. So in saying that, so we had this really beautifully branded solution. We had to make sure, though, that we had the framework around it, because the minute you demonstrate this, the questions were coming. Is it safe? Is it secure? What about hallucination? Everything everyone's read on the internet about this, as well as what their colleagues have said about it in other organizations. So we did need to make sure that we had the principles for appropriate use and guidelines of appropriate use of generative AI. So we made sure that that was logged, and when people do use it, they understand the limitations and the potential as well. We launched this back in September, I think it was September 23, and we saw a steady uptake. We did it quite personalized when we did the launch. We'd go around to teams and hold special emerging tech sessions. So when we were out in the field or talking to field workers, we talked to them about how they might want to use it, which is a very different scenario to how the PAs and EAs, for instance, in the back office would want to use it. And we showed them specific use cases to get them thinking about how they might use it and then take it further. I guess what we really wanted to see out of this is people taking it further, taking it to use cases that we in technology and data would never have thought of. So yes, it was. It's been pretty successful on the back end. We've learned a lot about what tokens, what the usage would be, the costs, etc. That we were all, and we monitored that all. So TCS were really good in making sure we had some controls, because we were very concerned about blowouts. If this does go gangbusters, what would happen? I'm pleased to say that didn't happen, but we've had a steady increase in usage over time.
So the most interesting thing I heard there, Anya, was the personas. So if I understood you correctly, depending on who asked the question, the answer might be provided differently. So on a danger tag, I think you called it, if it's a field person that's asking a question, then they may get a more technical answer versus an EA or a CFO who's asking the same question.
That's exactly correct. And it all comes down to prompt engineering. And so that's something that we are still working on, and increasing that AI capability and literacy across the organization. Even today, when we're using things like Copilot, the prompting is so key. So making sure that either you've got it in your settings or you're explaining to the tool that you're using in GPT, for instance, I am a field worker. As a field worker who has been working 25 hours nonstop, please explain to me what I need to be concerned about, et cetera, et cetera. So really making people understand that you have to treat it as quite a dumb but intelligent being is interesting. And we're still working with that. We're still trying to explain how prompting can really harness the power. And that's the biggest learning we've got from this is don't underestimate how important effective prompting or prompt engineering is.
One of the things about generative AI is you have to rethink the skills that are needed and how you retrain different personnel. Could you talk us through a little bit through how you're looking at that, right? You have technical CIO staff. Their roles may be changing a little bit. You have frontline workers who may need to understand and have a comfort level with communicating with a chat agent. How is Endeavour approaching that?
It really is quite a big cultural shift in general. So I guess the first steps are to make people comfortable with the technology. And we've started that. And I think most of our demonstrators have been quite lighthearted in the sense that you need a dad joke to open up your meeting. You need an icebreaker to open up your next meeting. This tool can help you find that icebreaker or help you ask the right questions. And we have a lot of dad jokes around. So that's been really good. So making it a fun thing to use at first. Then taking it to the next step is how can I actually help you with the mundane tasks you do every day? So there are so many people who are summarizing documents, doing executive summaries, dealing with new jargon that they've never had to deal with before, but they don't understand what it is. But yes, they do need to respond. So if I'm talking as a back office worker, talking to someone in the field, I can now have Energy GPT next to me, giving me the right questions to ask that field worker that I wouldn't have known before, and explaining to me what that is. So it's a multi-layered approach, but our approach is to start by gaining confidence in the tool, and then bringing it into their day-to-day worlds, but then taking it to the next level and then getting people to think differently in general, not just with the technology. I really do feel that with the emergence of this technology, it puts problem solving on its head, turns problem solving on its head. Before you wouldn't solve a complex problem unless you were very competent and very technical, et cetera. But now, by just thinking logically and a little bit of design thinking, really understanding what the problem is, going back to basics, everyone has the opportunity to resolve really complex solutions with a new coding language called English or Australian or American. So it's almost a little bit about unlearning some stuff as well. So breaking down those barriers and making sure people realize that this is actually enabling them to do more, not putting a huge barrier of technology between them and the potential outcomes. So, so it's multi-layer. We are going to be doing it's about AI literacy uplift, and that starts from the top down. So our executives need to know about AI and the potential there. Very different type of understanding to what our field workers and back office might want to do as well. So it's across the organization and it's multi-level.
Excellent. So with what you've seen so far, Anya, what sort of outcomes are you seeing? What sort of results are you seeing from the use of this technology? Is there an increase in productivity, an increase in improvement in response times? How are you measuring the value of this kind of a project?
That was very key to this proof of concept, really, to understand what are the usage patterns, who's using it, and is this something that we want to invest in? So we've seen a steady increase in usage. We are at almost 20% of the organization, and you've got to understand that a big part of our organization doesn't actually sit in front of a computer at all. So 20%, whilst it doesn't sound high, it's actually quite a significant amount of our organization is using Energy PT. Now, it's a habit, so we need to keep on reinforcing it. It's not a set and forget. So you do have to keep on going, did you use Energy PT for that, et cetera, et cetera. So and making sure people aren't fearful of using it. So making sure that they shout about it and tell everyone when they've used it rather than hide it. So it's not cheating. Steady increase in usage. The most common usage has been around the global one, which is more like the open chat GPT to the internet, in that sense that it's got all that huge large language model. It's not our enterprise specific content. But what we have seen is a lot of people want more and more of our enterprise content to be on this. I think a big part of the organization sees that we have so much policies, documentation, that this could really put all that in the hands of someone, on your mobile device, giving you the information you need very quickly instead of having to understand and know where to find certain procedures might be. Now, the challenge for us has been this is still a proof of concept. So in doing this proof of concept, or pilot, I should say, we've developed, or we've been given a number of use cases where teams across the organization would really find value in having our own content in there and learning from our own content. And that's where we're heading towards now. We really want to productionize this system. The business wants it. They see the value in using this across our own content, as well as see the value in having this connected to other repositories of information. So getting some APIs built. So where we can really harness the power of our data. So one thing that we do have here at Endeavour Energy is massive amounts of data. Any outage has a whole heap of information, all our network information. So weather information. Imagine just putting all that power of all that information into something that can then start learning from it, generating content based on it. I think there's the potential's unlimited, potentially. The potential's unlimited. So we want to really get this into production so we can really start playing with it with our own data.
From a change management or a culture perspective, what I really get from your story is you started with an open version of the service, and then as people get comfortable with that, they move over to the enterprise internal version. And then what I really loved about your story was that you encouraged your folks to use it for icebreakers, right? It really brings that technology, it makes it more accessible outside of the quote unquote work environment, right? Now it becomes a fun tool to use with your peers.
Yep, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I spoke about as well when I'm socializing the tool across the organization is that could be really cool is if you understand this. And we do always explain a little bit about what AI is, the history of AI, so that they know maybe a tiny bit more than their teenage kid might know about using ChatGPT. So it is all about educating them around what this is, and also making sure that our responsibility isn't just for people at work. It's also understanding what they do at home. So understanding that when they're using ChatGPT, where their content is going versus when they're using it at home, using it at work. So no, it's been a fun experience. And yes, I hope we have some people in our organization that are giving their teenagers a run for their money when it comes to this technology as well. Now, that would be my goal.
So parents will go home and be the cool parents. So they'll know about AI and ChatGPT, and they'll be teaching the kids.
You never know. You never know.
Awesome. So Anya, as you look ahead at the next phase and at other projects, you've learned a lot in this project. What advice do you have? Do you have tips, lessons learned for your peers at Endeavour, but also for the audience who might be considering something similar? What would you offer them as they consider this journey?
Don't underestimate the cultural change. It's not just about using a new tool and training someone on how to do a bit of prompting. It's about thinking differently. And there are a lot of barriers to success culturally when it comes to this technology. Unfortunately, for good and bad, the PR on things like generative AI is something that you need to be very conscious about when you do launch something like this. With that in mind as well, do consider early on making sure that your legal teams and your risk teams are involved early on, cybersecurity, etc. So making sure that it's not an afterthought, that you build something that complies and is safe and secure, and you can give your employees the comfort factor that it's safe and secure and is meeting all those requirements. Because the worst thing you can do is turn something on, in my mind, then have legal come up and say, oh, and then you have to turn it off, work on some policy and come back to that. So the good thing is now you can actually use this technology to help you come up with those policies. So so there are some pluses there. So yes, all those things that you often think are afterthoughts, bring them to the beginning of the implementation. The other one that I think is quite important as well, because it is such a big cultural change, is making sure that your people and culture teams are involved. They can get a lot of benefit out of this. And I guess which every team that you do have to engage with to make sure that it is legally risk and covers the people aspect. I always talk to them about not only what is it that we need to comply, but how can this technology help them in their roles as well. So I don't believe there's any part of the organization that can't benefit from this technology. It's just finding that nugget. So cultural change, establishing those connections with those parts of the organization that often are the afterthought. And then making sure you've got really good partners. So having partners who you trust and who will go above and beyond. I know that with TCS, when it came to even just coming up with things like a bit of a logo and a tagline, nothing was too small. We worked as a real team. It wasn't us and them. It was we're learning together. And I think that's the other thing with this technology, because it is so new. Having one team to deliver this. So it was Microsoft, it was TCS, and it was us. And we created a working group very early on that was the three of us. And we learned as we went together. That it's almost like you can't really have too many runs on the board as a consultancy, having done this before. So let's learn together and let's fail together as well. If something's not working, let's call it out and be brave enough to do so. But luckily, so far, we're on the right track.
Awesome, Anya. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm very grateful for the work that you've done with us. You've jumped in early on this new wave of technology. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to TCS. They're a key partner for us in generative AI in so many areas. And we wish you the best of luck. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.